Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm back with another video. I'm going to talk about a topic that people have been addressing in a certain way regarding this expansion of imperial expansion. You could say that Trump is engaged in, especially with this latest um, designs on Greenland and Canada. And what does that all mean? I'm calling this is Donald Trump in the is his vision of America like a giant red star. So, what is a giant red star? I checked with Grok to confirm my understanding of what a red star giant is. A red star giant is indeed a star in a late stage of its life cycle that has become very large due to expansion. Here's a clear explanation of what's happening. Stars like our sun, a low to intermediate mass, about up to 8 times the sun's mass, spend most of their lives on the main sequence, fusing hydrogen into helium in their cores. When the core hydrogen is depleted, the fusion in the core stops temporarily. The core contracts under gravity, heating up the surrounding shell of hydrogen, which then begins fusing. This shell fusion produces extra energy, causing the star's outer layers to expand dramatically, often to hundreds of times the original radius, while the surface cools to about 5,000 degrees Kelvin or less to give it a red color. So the star is now called a red giant, much larger and more luminous, but cooler and redder on the surface. This phase marks the beginning of the end for such stars. For our sun, this will happen in about 5 billion years, when it expands enough to likely engulf Mercury, Venus, and possibly Earth. So there's a pretty strong possibility that you and I will not be around to experience that problem. However, Donald Trump is making an American red star giant. So this is what I'm talking about. This is the main point I'm making here. President Trump wants to expand the United States to take Greenland and maybe even Canada and other countries. Meanwhile, the U.S. is decaying on the inside. The hydrogen's getting used up. Massive debt, infrastructure either aging or obsolete or failing, as in bridges, electrical grids, and so on. It's living on ever-increasing debt, and these are all symptoms of imperial decay. Trump may think that he's taking on new territory as assets, but isn't it possible that maintaining frozen Greenland and even Canada, maybe these assets aren't paying for themselves? But Greenland has no significant consumer economy, and extracting minerals takes time and money. So the hydrogen that fueled the U.S. empire is running out. And Trump thinks that he can save it by repeating the expansion that the United States went through in the early years. But the U.S. of 2026 is old and decrepit, not young and vital. Therefore, it looks to me like the U.S. new round of imperial expansion, which worked well in the U.S. earlier life cycle, will work to only quicken the fall of the U.S. sun. So let's dig into this more. How imperial overreach has not strengthened but weakened aging empires. The analogy to a giant red star, a once vibrant system expanding outward while its core resources dwindle, hastening its eventual collapse, is a provocative one when applied to empires or superpowers. There's certainly a historical precedent for overexpansion contributing to decline, and the current U.S. physical and infrastructure strains add weight to my concerns. So let me break this down. Here we are in January of 2026, and President Trump has indeed revived an escalated interest in acquiring Greenland, framing it as an absolute necessity for national security to counter Russia and China in the Arctic, which is ridiculous, and economic reasons, mineral wealth. He's floated purchases, tariffs on Denmark and Europe to pressure a deal, and even not fully ruled out military options, though he's walked back direct force threats at times. The rhetoric has included statements like, we're going to get Greenland one way or the other. And Denmark, which was perfectly fine with directing its neurotic obsession with the Russian threat is shocked that it faces a threat from its old buddy, the USA. I thought well, it was Russia that was going to come in and take over our territory. Now you, Donald Trump, are saying you're going to do it. I thought you were our friend or our uncle or our daddy. Now, as far as Canada is concerned, comments have been more rhetorical, joking or threatening about making it the 51st state, criticizing its defense spending and border security, and tying it to a broader Arctic strategy. He said military forces highly unlikely for Canada, which I'm sure is no consolation to Canadians. But tariffs and economic pressure are tools he's used or threatened. No serious annexation push exists beyond bluster, and Canada, like Denmark and Greenland, firmly opposes it. Indeed, Mark Carney, although a lifelong central banker, with all that ideological imperialistic baggage, now says imperialism is fine for taking Ukraine to take Russia, but why are you picking on us, Mr. Trump? So these aren't formal policy proposals with detailed plans, but they echo historic U.S. expansionism, and it's the ideology of expansion. I might mention periodically, I just found out that Donald Trump has disinvited Canada from joining his board of peace. And I'm thinking that Mark Carney is probably thinking, thank you, Donald Trump, for disinviting us, because we really wanted to tell you to go to hell. It's a lousy idea, and we don't want to pay you another $1 billion. That's another story. So what are the economic realities of potential assets? These new territories aren't automatic boons, especially in a mature, debt-laden power. So Greenland has a population of 56,000. It has a tiny consumer market, nowhere near Europe's, so it's not going to buy a lot of our stuff. And Trump thinks Europe is a drain on the U.S. already. So if Trump thinks Europe is a drain, what do they think about Greenland? It has vast potential in rare earth minerals, which are critical for technology and defense. It has oil and gas, but extraction faces huge hurdles: harsh climate, massive infrastructure needs to build roads, ports, energy, environmental regulations, and high costs. The estimates of resource value run $2 to $5 trillion underground, which is great, but realizing that could take decades and billions in investment. Short term, it would likely be a net drain, similar to how Alaska was initially mocked as Seward's folly, but later paid out via resources. Strategic Arctic bases are valuable, but maintaining a frozen territory adds military and logistical costs without quick payoffs. And does Trump really think his fantasy Golden Dome is going to stop Russian missiles from attacking Greenland or attacking the United States, the lower 48? So, he's being really unrealistic here. And also, the other issue is that he wants to, develop Greenland's resources. Well, we already know that Venezuela has, trillions of dollars worth of resources. And when Donald Trump brought some CEOs to the White House and pitched them on the idea, they said that Venezuela's uninvestable. So if Venezuela's uninvestable, what about Greenland, which has a terrible climate, far worse than Venezuela's? As far as Canada is concerned, they have a GDP of 2.2 trillion, ninth globally, not too bad. Population of 41 million, not bad, in a fairly decent consumer market. And it's rich in oil, minerals, timber. And as a hypothetical state, it would rank third in the U.S. GDP behind California and Texas. But annexation, it's impossible without consent or war. And Canada is a sovereign ally with a strong economy and military ties. Costs would be astronomical. Potential conflict, global backlash, which is be the end of NATO, economic disruption, integrated supply chains, since U.S. gets much oil from Canada, and trade is already deeply intertwined. U.S. exports heavily to Canada. So gaining it wouldn't add much new consumer demand, but it could destroy value through chaos. And in fact, Canada is saying They just went to China. It's not that it's going to be a huge deal, but it's kind of like a warning shot that America, if you're going to be really antagonistic to us, we have other choices. This is happening all over the world. Historical U.S. territories like Puerto Rico, which is a net federal spender in that it spends more on Puerto Rico than it receives in taxes, which is another interesting question why we even need to keep Puerto Rico. They don't want to be part of the U.S. And even Alaska, which was initially costly, show remote, unique areas often require ongoing subsidies for infrastructure and defense. Now, in terms of the U.S. internal decay and debt, the U.S. does face serious challenges. Its debt is now $38 to $39 trillion. That's 124% of gross domestic product, with interest payments alone rivaling major budget items. The deficits continue to grow despite growth. In terms of infrastructure, I guess it's the American Society of Civil Engineers 2025 report card gave an overall C, up from C- in 2021, thanks for some additional funding. But bridges and bridges and the grid and energy, it's kind of mixed. The backlog in all these infrastructure problems remains in the trillions. There's a funding cliff looming in post-2026 when that money that had been appropriated expires. Aging systems, specifically bridges averaging near 50-year lifespan, and climate risks persist. So pursuing expensive territorial adventures, diplomatic pressure, tariffs triggering retaliation or worse, could exacerbate this, diverting focus and resources while trade wars hurt growth. Now, as for Greenland as a protective outpost against Russia and China, is it really a protective outpost or is it actually a ball and chain? I'm mixing metaphors here, but obesity in people has a psychological factor. All that fat is like protection from the outside, plus overeating compensates for emptiness anxiety. Likewise, Trump wants to consume Greenland as an outpost for defense against a threat that doesn't really exist. The best he can do is use Greenland to threaten Russia's sea lands in the Arctic. And heaven forbid negotiations and détente with Russia, which did eliminate the supposed threat in the past. Why can't they do that? And besides, the U.S. We're the ones who have conjured up Russia as a threat in the past, even though Russia it's a strategic ally from the very beginning in the our Revolutionary War. Russia refused to go along with England and supply mercenaries to put down the colonists, and was actually supplying the colonists. In the Civil War, the United States was being threatened by British warships, and the Russian Tsar said, "Don't do that. We're sending warships to protect the America's coast." So Russia's been protecting us from England, and we think Russia's the threat. It's like, where do these people come from? And of course, the U.S. and Russia were allies in World War I and World War II. So the acquisition of Greenland will result in an inhospitable landmass, which is a logistic drain, if not a nightmare, for the U.S. budget. So in terms of historical parallels of overexpansion and decline, many empires fell partly due to overreach. The Roman Empire had vast expansion. It was strained administration, military, and finances. Its borders became undefendable, leading to economic stagnation and collapse. The Spanish Empire, gold from the Americas, initially boomed, but overextension, wars, and inflation led to decline. The British Empire, imperial overstretch by the British, post-World War II, forced decolonization. And others, like the Mongol Empire or the Soviet Empire, all contracted because of economic strain from an arms race or from empire maintenance. In contrast, successful expansions, like in the early U.S. Western expansion, Louisiana Purchase, happened when the nation was younger, less indebted, and territories integrated productively. For late stage power like the modern U.S., with high debt and a mature economy, forced or costly expansion could indeed accelerate strain, much like a red star giant flaring brightly before fading. The benefits, that is strategic depth and resources, which is Trump is basically talking about here, might accrue long-term, but short-term costs, diplomatic isolation, economic hits, and debts could weaken the core faster. So that said, these ideas remain mostly rhetorical so far. There's been no actual annexation, but if pursued seriously, I'm concerned about hastening the decline of the U.S., which is based on the history and economics of it. The U.S. sun isn't collapsing imminently, although people have been predicting the U.S. economy collapsing for 50 years. It keeps on going. But ignoring internal repairs for outward grabs would fit the pattern of imperial hubris. Now, there's one little issue here that I want to bring up, which is a kind of counter argument, which is that Trump has this obsession with expanding the United States, and he says, "Oh, it's the Don Road Doctrine. We're gonna take over the Western Hemisphere. We're not going to let anybody else in. Oh, but we still get to hang around in Taiwan and in the Middle East and still mess around with Russia around the periphery, Azerbaijan, and we still want to go into Iran and cause trouble there." So it's like Trump wants his cake and eats it too. So the concern that I have is that according with the physics analogy, if the United States really turns into a red giant, it could end up, expanding to end up with a war with Russia or China. So that's what I'm concerned about. And but I think I just can't see how his plan is going to work. It looks to me like a manifestation of his own psychological problem, which are manifest, and that's what it looks like to me. It's hard to say how things are going to go, but that's how I see it. So thanks again for listening. I hope you'll support my channel by sharing this video or liking or commenting or anything to let me know that I'm actually existing. I know that I do have fans, so and also if you'd like to support my channel with a buy me a coffee, or you can buy one of my information billboard t-shirts where I am not promoting my brand, so to speak, but you can order products online through my store. For example, the Question Everything logo is on a t-shirt that I sell. So that would be one way of supporting my channel. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk with you again soon.